All right, so I'm pretty lucky. I get to ask some questions, first of all, and it's pretty nice, and we tried to look kind of cool and mod, but, I'm glad we got your approval. So the book is incredible. It's a treasure to look at. Where did this project come from? What was the genesis?
So growing up in New Jersey, we were looking for a lot of distractions, and my father showed me, my father showed me The Man with the Golden Gun, which the James Bond film, and I was fascinated with Scalamandra's hideout, his 3 nipples, they were kind of like blew me away, as well as his little micro henchman tattoo. Yeah. And so from that point on, I became just fascinated with film architecture, and this book was really in the works for many years, and we really put together a great team of people. There were over 30 people involved in the book. It took over 2 years to put together, and it's really incredible. Yeah.
So as you thought about the book, long process, did you develop a set criteria for layers? Like, who makes the book? How, what's the criteria?
That's a really interesting point. Well, first of all, if we probably knew how long it would take, we probably wouldn't have done it. We thought it was going to be something, very quick. Just even legal was so complex. So we'll kind of leave that on the side.
We know about that.
But, essentially the criteria was as such is that it had to be something inspirational to me architecturally. It had to be something that was aspirational from the standpoint that you would want to own it and inhabit it. There were a bunch of projects that we were thinking about, like for instance, Darth Vader has this fortress called Fortress Vader, and it's on this horrible planet that's all volcanoes, and it just looks very unpleasant. So nothing that we did was unpleasant. Yeah. It all had to be very aspirational and very much desirous that you wanted to go there. So someone in one of the talks mentioned that these movies, it's almost like a lot of house porn. That it's real estate porn. That there's this incredible, exploitation of incredible homes and things like that. Where when these movies were made, there weren't that many outlets to see this stuff.
Yeah.
So that's why they were really even more impactful when they came out originally, the movies.
So for us, like the spy world, it's shining light on this hidden world. It's shining light on a world of luxury and architecture and settings. So that makes really good sense.
Yeah, because people were used to living in suburbia, and these homes really were out of this world. And some of them were real. Many of the houses that are used in the Bond films were from one of my favorite architects, John Lautner, who was a disciple of Frank Lloyd Wright.
Well, it's interesting. One of the essays mentioned something about how almost the use of these modernist houses in these films as villains' lairs, people were a little uncomfortable with modernism. Yeah. And do you think it made them more or less comfortable with it?
I think certain people probably resonated with it, but other people were like, whoa, I'm happy with my Victorian Tudor home or something like that. And I actually grew up in a neighborhood of there were 5 different house models, but none of them were lairs.
Well, I'm old enough to remember the carpeted conversation pits that people were like, I'm going to throw a kind of lair area into my suburban house. So
well, it's interesting because a lot of people, when they live in these communities, they modify their homes to kind of make them unique and special. We call it Pimp Your House, from the Pimp Your Ride series. So,
Cool. Well, so there are 15 films in the book. I, of course, gravitate towards the spy ones, but love some of the other movies. But how did you choose which films to include?
Yeah, they had to follow that criteria we spoke about, be very aspirational, be interesting and inspiring for me architecturally. But they also had to have a clear villain. And that villain, so one of the movies that, and one of the houses, it's one of my favorite, is the Sheets Goldstein house. I don't know if you've seen The Big Lebowski. It's the house of the sort of porno king drug guy. And he really wasn't the antagonist in the film. So we're kind of remorse that we didn't include that because it just didn't kind of fit the criteria of there was a clear villain and this was his
But
hangout.
it's a slippery slope. You start,
It is,
getting away from, and then people will be like, he wasn't a true villain.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
So it was kind of tricky, and it was very kind of eccentric, the selection criteria. It was very personal, and we had a lot of discussions with a lot of architects in the office and people who also contributed to the book, and even speaking to the director, Michael Mann, where there's a really great interview there, which really meant a lot to me because it's part of this New Jersey growing up, but I used to watch also Miami Vice every Friday night with my father. The music went on, and I ran into the room to watch TV, and I was very inspired by the architecture, mostly of bad guys there.
Well,
so
they have
the money and the
Yeah.
and the style. So and when he came to Miami to film the movie, he actually approached me and said, "Your architecture represented the new Miami." So we established a really good relationship, and for a Jersey boy, that was really nice.
He shot in your house,
He did.
I believe.
He killed someone in our house.
You got to Google Villa Allegra.
Yeah. So it's
lives
in the
in a lair.
Yeah, it's in the movie, but it was kind of funny because Michael's just so incredible with the detail, and he was like shooting this blood everywhere, and he's like, not enough blood, and I'm like, oh my god, my house is gonna be hard, And he
I hope you kept the kids like.
Yeah, I didn't. I don't know if I had kids at that point, or maybe they were very young and they.
Don't let them see it.
Yeah,
for
don't
a
let them
while.
see
Yeah.
like a dead person in the house. But they had the SWAT team outside from Miami Beach, and it was kind of a big operation. So
Sounds like a interesting way to fulfill your fantasy of living in a lair without being a bad guy.
Yeah.
But you got to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, a lot of the movies in this book are Bond movies.
Yes.
Of course.
it could have all been Bond.
It could have all been
It
Bond,
could have.
and I think it's kind of neat that it isn't, because
Yeah.
it exposed me some other things than
Yeah.
Bond. But can you tell us a little bit about Ken Adams and his impact, and how the Bond movies shaped how we all think about these glorious layers?
Yeah. So Ken Adams was the production designer for most of these Bond films. And he was an architect, but he turned to producing sets and other things. And he grew up in Nazi Germany. So there's a lot of influence, and there's a great interview with him that you don't really see much. This is, he's kind of a hidden starchitect, if you will. But he really inspired it. And one of the things that kind of pushed the book out is we had done a book on our work, and we asked some architectural critics to write about our work, and they said that they saw a lot of inspiration of Ken Adams and John Lautner and from the films in our work. So that was also kind of an impetus, like, well, we better get this out soon. But he was really incredible. The sets, You Only Live Twice, was the most expensive set ever to be made in the history of film at that time. And there wasn't any digital effect, so everything had to be built. It was like the size of a football stadium.
This is the volcanic layer. We have a
Blowfield.
small version
mini one.
over there in the diorama, but I mean that was just extraordinary.
It was incredible, and it just, his vision really set a lot of inspiration for myself. I think it was mostly subconscious. It wasn't that we looked to these films for inspiration, but
leak in, and I was intrigued reading about how much he was involved with the furnishings and with the underwater lair.
Yes.
That he's like, trying to find a real place that would work but doesn't exist, and then creating this, and then thinking, well, and we need these really lavish period antiques, because that was really a moment in time, this really modern environment, but like the gilt framed mirrors and the rugs.
The Atlantis, which was an incredible location, which is, you might see it popping up. I don't know.
We've got
I don't think it's
gobo
sequenced, but this incredible anthropomorphic object that comes out of the water, and in The Spy Who Loves Me, and the first time Russia and the U.S. Worked together. But it was this incredible juxtaposition that Ken Adams spoke about, where you have this beyond futuristic, war machine that goes up and down, and to the music of Mozart often. And he has all these incredible rigged killing devices. So when James Bond comes, he has this gun that's like at the bottom of his table. And James Bond obviously knows about that. And then the elevator.
I mean, who's going to fall for the old gun under the table?
And then the elevator floor falls out and shoots you into the shark tank. So there's a lot of very interesting touches, but it's all in this very sort of Gothic, Baroque interior that reminds one of Downton Abbey, actually.
And was he a forerunner of combining these very traditional, epic, over-the-top furnishings in a modern environment?
Or
was
so.
that part of do you know, was that
Well, I think like what
time?
he was trying to do is like sort of domesticize these very incredible places. So, there's in The Man with the Golden Gun, there's like a very kind of plush interior in these caves that exist within these existing, rock islands, these limestone cliffs in Thailand that became very, very popular, actually, and apparently is like kind of destroyed because of all the tourists who went to go see the James Bond site. So it's you never too much
Blessing
a good
and
thing.
A curse.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But he really created this domestic feeling in these very harsh, sort of very futuristic bunker interiors.
Well, playing on that domestic and aspirational aspect, which one would you want to live in?
I love my first one. You never forget your first one. The Man with the Golden Gun was really incredible. I just and it's actually probably inspired me for much of our work. We've actually had the opportunity to do some projects in the desert. In the Middle East, where we've like carved into rock and things of that.
Describe that one a little bit more. That's a lot in our house.
The Man with the Golden Gun. Mm-hmm. Well, it's actually just sets.
It's fake.
It's just sets, but it looks just incredibly real. I mean, they built it, not all of it, but they built it within these cliffs. But for me, it's been a big inspiration for our work. Yeah.
And are there any of the layers in the book or outside of the book that you would have done something different?
I don't know.
You would have
I think
tweaked, or do you find them perfect?
I think they're really well done. They're very much about the personality. And interestingly enough, in doing this book, I mean, one appreciates them from their architecture, for their incredible impact. But in reading about these sets, there's a lot of things that are very deep in the production designers thinking about these spaces. So there's a very interesting article about Ex Machina. I don't know if anyone's seen that, a great movie, but we actually spoke with the production designer, and they really give it a lot of thought. So they're thinking about how every bit of design or architecture in a movie is helping tell the story.
Well, just to jump, that's not Spy, but we'll jump into it for a second because we were talking about Ex Machina, which I always thought, it turns out the house is in Scandinavia.
Yes.
I always thought it was set in Scandinavia.
Yes. It's
but
Alaska.
It's in the movie, it's in Alaska. And what did you tell me that they did to make it more
Well, it's actually,
Alaskan?
it's a series of structures. Parts of it is filmed in a hotel, and other parts are in a house by the same architect. But they actually brought in large pine trees to give the impression that it was Alaska, because of the nature wasn't very accurate.
Right, yeah.
But the setting was perfect. And I think there's like one part of that that just speaks a lot about the power of this very wealthy, they say like Mark Zuckerberg with a six-pack or something like that was one of the quotes. But that, he has so much wealth that the line in the beginning where he's flying over, Caleb is flying over, and he's like, when are we going to get to the house? And he's like, well, we've been flying over it like for 2 hours. You're like, oh my God, like that's a lot of land, a lot of power and control of nature. So it's a great
welcome
film.
to the property.
Yeah.
We'll be there in an hour.
Exactly.
Yeah. So who would you like? Is there a villain that you'd like to design a lair for? We got asked by Jeffrey Epstein to design a house, actually. Like, we didn't do it, but... who would you want it? Is there a villain you'd like to design?
Who likes villains? I actually like to do things for good guys. So, but
Nice.
design awesome layers.
Any fictional villain that you would have
You know,
fun?
I really do get inspired by the bad, but I want good people to live in
Nice.
the villains. But you know, some people say that Michael Bay could be villainous on the set, so and he was definitely interesting to work with, and I've got yelled at quite a bit, but all in good. But the end product was
It's the creative
incredible.
process.
Yes,
Exactly.
yeah. He's used to moving around like 4,000 people on sets, and we would have meetings on the set where he rigged these hydraulic lifts, I guess like Transformers 3 or something, where the whole building was tilting, and we were there having a meeting, and we were all like strapped in, and everything was flying, and it was pretty fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we actually used those guys to build a very large, like a 40-foot window in the house that lifts up. So the set guys ended up building that, which I fought because I'm like, you can't have set people building a real house. But it was his hydraulic people, and they developed something really cool where the hydraulics actually close the window and it's counterweighted.
Will you use that elsewhere?
I don't ever repeat
Oh.
things, and that's like one of my things. And Michael wouldn't let me either. He'd probably
Right,
probably kill me. Yeah, He doesn't let me even go bring clients to the house. He wants it all kind of secret, secret lair.
I feel like we've.
But it is kind of a secret lair because it's hidden from the road. It's built into the hillside. It's very dramatic. So
That sounds fun.
it is. But we get to work with a lot of really cool, good people.
Good.
Like Pharrell or the owner of GoPro, and build these dream homes. So it's great to take the book inspiration and put it to good use.
Now, do you have you seen, not necessarily in the book, but in the book is fine, in the world of pop culture, have you experienced any feelings where you think that Lair and that villain do not match up?
No, I think like most people, most of these production designers have got it right.
Got it right?
Yeah, there's always, it's believable. It's for us, it's believable. We just wish there were like some bad people living in architecture that we really appreciated, so we could have put in the book. So there was more of that, you know, like couldn't he be the villain in the movie, like the Big Lebowski? Couldn't
And
it have
just
been-
be worse,
and
so we
could
can
because
we want to include that building because you love the building,
exactly.
Lair or not.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think if somebody's coming to you fresh to design a Lair for a movie? I know you don't want to work for bad people, but what would you want to know about the villain, or how would you want to go about designing a Lair? And basically, this is how do you go about doing your design projects? But we're gonna
so we got like peripherally involved. I don't know if you guys saw that latest Michael Bay film called Six Underground. Six, is that what it's called? Six Underground? Yeah, I believe it is. It's on Netflix. It's actually pretty intense. But Michael was inspired by the house we did for him. They basically like put it up on the top of a building, parts of it, and we got involved in helping kind of conceive of that experience. But you know, for us, most of our work is very inspired by the site. Mm-hmm. And so for us, I need to know where the villain wants to live. You know, where's his
Do you need
domain?
to know his evil plot?
I'd like rather not know.
Okay,
you know?
okay.
But you know, for us, it's really about site, and a lot of these projects, or a lot of these layers, are very interesting how they work with the site, and some of them are like hidden in urban areas, like Lex Luthor and Superman, which as a kid I was like, wow, this is really cool. He has this pool in this abandoned, you know, almost like underground central station. And one of the quotes that I thought was great from him was like, who else can have this much real estate in New York?
Right.
You know, it's
gotta be a villain.
So it's, and he had a whole sort of real estate plot. I don't know if you remember, but his objective was to basically buy all the land east of the San Andreas Fault and then set off missiles, kill everyone to the left so his land would be more valuable. That was his diabolical.
A lot of villains want to work with those fault lines in California.
They really, you know. So some evil real estate developers. I don't know. It's kind
I think Christopher Walken was doing that in a Bond movie.
Oh, really?
I think so. I'm sure my colleagues will correct me if I got that wrong. So.
But there are no evil real estate developers in real life.
No, none.
Or in Washington.
So, as we've mentioned, some of these some of these structures exist. We just talked about Grand Central
Yeah.
Station. Are there any structures that you feel like are just crying out to be cast as a villain's lair in a film?
I don't know. Maybe it's just because I'm here, but the Washington Monument looks like a cool, kind of like right under everyone's nose. Kind of like there's a missile in there or something, you know. So I don't, it opens up. Maybe that's been in a movie. I don't know.
Can you
but
see it just like
Yeah.
that? I mean,
Well, I actually was thinking maybe there's something in the basement of this place that's good, only for good.
yeah, there's a food court. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of evil.
I did see that. Yeah. So, but I feel like there's some like secret spy organization all the way in the bowels of this building. I don't know.
Remember
can't tell.
when I took
That
you
was
on
the
that
tour,
floor?
but,
Yeah, and I made you.
Yeah,
I
we
got
couldn't
you-
get in.
Yeah.
So,
You were not supposed to see that. This is my last question, so you guys get your questions ready. What's next? What do you think the next wave of layers will look like?
That's good. I mean, a lot of crime that you see happening these days is very cyber. So I think there's going to be like more of a VR layer. And I actually am working on this project right now in Austin. The client is like a real tech wizard. And he showed me some like VR experience that I've never, I mean, it felt like you were
There.
in the room. You were like in this museum and you could like walk up to the art. It was like the most incredible thing, and it was at 4K resolution. So I think like there's a cyber
That's neat.
villain lair thing that may not be physical.
Yeah, because we've met with people, who are conceiving environments through 3D, so you could constantly change your layer.
Yes.
Tired of the artwork?
Yeah.
Change it.
Yeah.
Wow,
So I think virtual
that's
is
pretty cool.
the next layer. Yeah.
All right.
So, yeah.
Okay, folks, I'm turning it over to you. I'm hoping you have some questions for Chad.
If not, we could just keep talking.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Do you mind coming to the mic so we'll pick you up? Thank you.
Was the final scenes of 2001 AD considered as a potential?
2001 Space Odyssey?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, it was funny that you bring that up because it was considered. And we're like, is Hal really bad? Like, who's the villain? But we were thinking about using the spaceship because it's been so inspiring to many people as architectural inspiration. And even Philippe Starck, the famous Parisian designer, was inspired a lot by Kubrick's work. And I actually have a big book of Kubrick next to my desk because there's some really incredible scenes in there. So, yeah, it didn't make it, but because we couldn't figure out if he was really a villain. But, yeah.
And he's AI.
He's AI.
Yeah.
Which, will eventually destroy us all. So maybe yes.
Yeah.
That's part of the future of villainy.
So you mentioned, this one, and then you mentioned The Big Lebowski.
Yes.
Is there anything else that ended up on the cutting room floor that kind of hurts as you think about it?
Well, we weren't sure. The Chemisphere House from Body Double, De Palma film, it was also in Charlie's Angels. And we're like, is Charlie's Angels a good enough film to kind of make it? We were thinking like...
Which...
although I did watch it with my son the other day during the holidays, and it was entertaining.
Yeah.
But it just didn't feel like fine cinema to like we were like constantly thinking
Not like Diamonds Are Forever.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not that all the Bond films are
They
great
are
either,
all
but
great.
it felt a little more campy.
Yes.
Although that's what the fun part
Yep.
about the Bond films too. So, got that trench coat, spy stuff. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'd like to know your thoughts on Blade Runner and how a movie about the future used a house from the past.
Yes.
Sort of what you think about that.
Well, that's another one that we wanted to put in, but we couldn't kind of verify that he was a villain. He created the simulated humans, but he didn't really it wasn't like he was a bad guy. he ended up getting killed as well by one of his creations. So we did want to use that, but we ended up using the Blade Runner 2049 instead. But the Frank Lloyd Wright home that you're referencing just actually, I believe, it is for sale or just sold.
Wasn't it in a bit of danger?
Well, yeah, the blocks. It's
Yeah.
one of Frank Lloyd Wright's block houses, which he was inspired by Mayan architecture, and all the sand that was mixed in it wasn't stable or something, so the blocks had to all be removed. But I think it's very interesting in a film like Blade Runner where they create this future, and we're actually designing a whole city right now, and I've been referencing Blade Runner, and I told the guy who's making the movie for us for this master plan to think about Blade Runner but more utopian, because Blade Runner is,
Yeah, I would really want more
Blade Runner is
utopian,
so dystopian.
Yeah.
But the house that was used is one of my favorite homes, and it's really beautiful in real life as well. And I haven't visited, but I've been working on getting into. I like to get into some of these homes. One of my friends actually owns the Chemisphere house for Body Double and Charlie's Angels, and it's actually the publisher Benedict Taschen, who publishes a lot of books. He didn't publish this, but and then also I've been to the Sheets Goldstein house from The Big Lebowski, and so we're working on. And I was trying to do an event in the Elrod house, which is Diamonds Are Forever, where James Bond fights Bambi and Thumper. And that's an incredible house. And there's a really interesting story about that house in the book, where apparently the land was like a normal development parcel, and John Lautner had them sink the plot and expose the rocks. And I never knew that. I always thought he found the site like that. So that's why his work's very inspiring to me, because the land and the nature start to inform the architecture. But there's a lot of great architecture in Blade Runner for sure. Yeah.
So all these different layers are pretty dynamic and expressive. Hello.
Yeah, you can.
So my question is, do any of these layers have any architectural features in common?
Could you all hear her? Do any of these layers have any architectural features in common?
Well, I think they're meant to impress. And I think a lot of what you see, even in the real world, unfortunately, in Nazi Germany or fascist Italy, architecture and design were very important tools to promote messages. And in some ways, many of these people or all of them are typically wrong, but they do have this vision of how they want to change the world. And you see that in the Bond films as well. Stromberg from the Atlantis or The Spy Who Loved Me, he believed the world, we kind of tarnished the world, and he wanted to create a new world. Many of these villains are sort of drinking their own Kool-Aid, and that's one of the things that they're always meant to kind of be impressive, and always meant to kind of convince you that these guys have tremendous power and tremendous wealth, and in some ways that they're promoting that crime does in fact pay. And interesting
also that they are people of taste.
Yes.
And
collecting things.
Yes,
and
yeah.
Exquisite.
The finer
yes,
things.
Exactly. And presenting that they're kind of sophisticated
Connoisseurs.
And it's interesting because while the villains have incredible homes, most of the protagonists have crap. They James Bond is essentially homeless.
Yeah.
He has Skyfall.
Doesn't he live under Moneypenny's desk?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
But even in Star Wars, right? The Death Star, even though it wasn't his home, but it's much better than the volcano planet. So we used it because it's just the most sinister thing of my childhood, like Darth Vader, and it was very impressive as an architecture, even to the fact that one of the greatest architects living today, Rem Koolhaas, has a building he designed that almost looks exactly like the Death Star. And he has another building that looks like one of the sand crawler, the big. Essentially, though, all these projects, they all have like that very incredible power domination within the kind of architecture. So I think that's a common thread. And then there's kind of like sub-genres in the book, right? So Lex Luthor has this incredible lair that's under New York City. So it's almost in plain sight, but it's in the bowels. There's others that are in nature, like Ex Machina, the Man with the Golden Gun, even the Elrod House. So there's kind of different strategies. Even it's a film that I wasn't aware of, but I saw afterwards is Danger Diabolik. It was sort of like a...
I had never heard of that before
kind of
your
a
book. Yeah.
wannabe Bond film, but it has some really swanky stuff that is very sexy.
It was fun to learn about. I didn't know
and they have
about
this
it.
like
Yeah.
entrance to their lair where it's like a rock that lifts up, and they drive their really cool car into these things. So it's really very exciting how all these guys have cool places. I just wish they were better, So thank you. Yeah. You're like lurking in the shadows. Back
Yeah.
there.
Hi there, I'm another short person. Hi.
Push it down. Yeah.
So I really, really love the fact that you have The Incredibles in your book. And so I wanted to ask your opinions about animated movies, and if I were to be more specific, the Despicable Me series.
I was thinking about,
I feel like that maybe it fits your criteria, but I don't know. It's your opinion. But
It was, I'll probably forget both parts of the questions, but there was a possibility that was going to be in it because that movie was really funny, and he had like a cool layer with the sharks and stuff. But we were kind of like, should we be putting in like too many animations? Would that like open it up? But it was really cool, and he's got like cool space. Everything he had was like very on brand. He had like a very branded, designed aesthetic.
yeah, I think the whole series kind of pokes fun at the villain and what the villain is supposed to be.
Totally. But in terms of The Incredibles, has anyone seen? It's honestly one of like my favorite movies of all time. I must have watched that movie at least 50 times, and in slow motion most of it, because we were asked by Disney to design a hotel in Shanghai, and we don't do thematic architecture, so they asked us like design a really cool hotel. And then after we designed this really cool hotel, they're like, now give it some thematic kind of overlay with Wall-E and The Incredibles. So we're like, Wall-E and The Incredibles. So we ended up working for, about 16 months with Pixar and collaborating with them. And we built like everything from both movies, Wall-E and The Incredibles. And we presented this project to Bob Iger, the CEO, John Lasseter, who was head of Pixar at the time. Everyone loved it. We got like a standing ovation. And then kind of a week later, we heard like Steve Jobs doesn't like the building. And we're like, what? Steve Jobs wasn't even there. What is he? And he was like, he's the largest shareholder of Disney at the time and the head of Pixar. So we ended up finding out that he said, just make sure it doesn't look like an office building. So because it was a very long, low building. But the funny part was, after like 18 months of designing this thing, collaborating with Pixar, Ralph Eggleston, who's like their senior production designer, we had a lot of great times together. He became a good friend. And we ended up getting a call after everything was approved, and they said, we got some strange news. Like, we did some research, and no one in China knows anything about Wall-E or The Incredibles. And we're like, oh my God, so it's going to be a Toy Story hotel. So, but it actually came out really cool, and we designed the Toy Story part in like a week. And like, but because, it was just, The Incredibles was probably the most inspiring. I mean, it probably could have been just an Incredibles hotel, because the Wall-E thing was kind of funny, and I did all these like landscape in front of the hotel of like piles of trash, but I was like out of trees, and no one liked that. But they said we couldn't recreate Trash Planet. It wouldn't be a good place to stay. But But The Incredibles, we had like the restaurant was like, they had like a private dining room, which was like Syndrome's table with like the high chairs and the big S. I mean, The Incredibles is really, I mean, I could watch that movie. If you said like, watch it tonight, I'd be like, yes. I mean, it is so good at every level. It's probably the best James Bond superhero kind of film ever. Brad Bird just killed it. And the interesting thing is that everything is designed. Like, there's nothing that exists. So they have to make everything and make every decision about every little detail. And The Incredibles 2 was not as incredible, but there was some cool design, like the house that they lived in was kind of cool, the hydrofoil boat. But, I mean, Pixar was amazing to collaborate with, and I had to put that in the book because No Man's Land is like super cool. It's kind of inspired by Blowfield and the volcano, and they
Did
kind of get.
Dr. Evil ever cross? Yeah.
It was there, but it felt like too silly in a way. So that was kind of part of the dialogue. Is like, we also were thinking of in The Fifth Element. I don't know if you guys seen The Fifth Element, but Bork, I guess his name is, his headquarters, which was kind of cool, but it didn't really. It was kind of a gloomy vision of the future, like slightly dystopian in some ways. So we ended up just naming our daughter Lilu, which is the savior of the universe. So nothing much to work out, fill those boots. But definitely so inspired by Pixar at every level. And if you ever can, you should go to their studio. It's amazing. They're so creative, and their process is amazing. And so, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Also, Fifth Element, like my favorite movie, so.
Which one? The Fifth Element?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, great costumes. Jean-Paul Gaultier did all the fashion and great casting. I mean, so yeah. So I really wanted that to be in, but it wasn't inspirational architecturally.
I can't remember. I mean, I remember the movie very well, but I can't remember Bork's house. So
you kind of remember more of his little animal creatures and stuff. And the costumes, I think, were.
Right.
And the music is actually phenomenal, too. Luc Besson did the music, I think. It was really
the
good.
whole look.
Luc Besson did the movie. I forgot who did the music, but it was amazing. French kind of sci-fi.
Yeah.
So, hi there.
Oh,
Hi. Were there any women layers in the book?
Danger Diabolic is the only kind of woman lair, because it's a husband and wife, I guess, or I know, but there are, most of them are like bachelor pads. They're really like, and there's a lot of beautiful women who come to visit. Some may get killed, unfortunately. But we were thinking about it, and we couldn't. Do you have one in mind?
No, but I'm thinking in this day and age.
I know.
Trying to think about Electric.
Well, there's one like bad.
Electric King and The World Is Not Enough. I'm trying to remember what her.
I mean, Octopussy, but was she good? I mean, I was watching that recently because my son really is interested in these James Bond films, and I feel like she was bad but good, and Maud Adams, I guess.
Yeah.
She had this incredible like palace, but she was kind of like help Bond, so it wasn't. Although I was watching the Charlie's Angels, the second one, because my son was like, "Oh, let's watch the second one," and Demi Moore plays a really.
She's a good
pretty
villain.
bad person, She's.
But I don't.
Being the layer.
I know she didn't really have a layer. She was kind of. I know, but maybe we need. I think the next Bond. Well, they were saying the best Bond might even be a woman, so I guess she can fight.
Yeah,
it.
they're kind of playing, a little.
Who's the next Bond?
There's somebody's got his number, but
right.
a lady.
Cool. Yeah. Oh.
Hi. So all the layers are obviously modern, especially from the outside. But why are they all horizontal rather than vertical?
Interesting. I never thought of that. Horizontal already. Yeah, I guess close to the land, hidden. Although Bork's in The Fifth Element was a high-rise, and I guess if you think about Blade Runner, which he wasn't really the bad guy, but the new bad guy had a very tall building. But I guess I don't know if he was like overtly bad. He was just kind of secretly bad. But well, Lair is basically a place, a shelter for like an animal to sort of hide out and kind of stay away from prey. So I guess they're
You don't want to stick
inherently,
out. Yeah.
inherently.
I might have a lady lair for you.
Yes, what do you got?
The Watchmen. Did anybody watch The Watchmen?
We
the
were
new
speaking about The
series?
Watchmen, but we didn't. That's more of a
True. The scientist in that has
Okay.
a pretty interesting. Anybody watch that? No.
I heard it's very good. But
It is. It's very good. But yeah, she's got quite a lair.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Great. Thank you. Yeah. Oh. Hi there.
Just a quick question about sort of the time frame. So many of these layers seem to be coming from mid-century onwards. As far as candidates that you guys considered, did you look at anything from, say, the early 20th century or even older, say, Metropolis or the Nautilus from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea?
Yeah. Well, that was always something for me that I enjoyed as a kid, the Nautilus from 20,000 Leagues. I don't know. There are a lot of other sort of layers, like Dracula's castle and things of that nature. But I guess it was stuff more that inspired me from an architectural standpoint.
I was wondering if maybe the film quality, the set quality hadn't quite caught up to sort of the vision of the layer in the early part of the 20th century, and we didn't really sort of reach the tech level to get these really fantastically visual.
Yeah, I think, many people believe that a lot of these things owe a lot to Metropolis. Mm-hmm. And so, in essence, they're everything kind of led from there. Mm-hmm. But I guess like North by Northwest has a little bit of an older style, kind of Frank Lloyd Wright, which is pre-Lautner, if you will. And the funny story is that they wanted to hire Frank Lloyd Wright to design a house for Hitchcock wanted Frank Lloyd Wright, but he wanted like 1/10 of the film budget to like design that, and they also wanted to build it on the back of Mount Rushmore, and the Park Service were like, "You're out of your mind." So that basically it's actually just painted sets, but I think that was probably, if I think about it, the most kind of like older design aesthetic, but most of it was to me kind of this very sexy,
Well, and
kind
villains
of swanky.
kind of hit their pace,
Yeah.
sort of mid-century.
And apparently, in some of the critics that we've spoken about, they said that in many of the older films, the good guys had like really cool places, and then like there was this kind of period of time where there were westerns and those types of movies, and most of these villains were just like on horseback, like creating villainy. And then after that was like this kind of era of kind of North by Northwest, which people say is almost like the first Bond film, the way that the movie flows and goes from place to place. And then the Bond films happen. So I think it's like all about kind of this kind of sequence of how villains became to have these really ominous kind of hideouts.
Yeah, it's kind of the golden age of villain layers.
Exactly. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I work here in DC for a real estate developer.
Oh, great.
Non-evil.
Oh, good. Good.
Right? And one thing that we're seeing is an ever-shrinking footprint. So if you were to get down to 300, 400, 500 square feet at most, what would be the most essential elements of a micro-layer?
Can you really have a micro-layer?
Can you?
Most of these...
I mean, like a little tiny piranha? Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I think like these layers, for some reason, most of them are impressive because of their size. But, I think that in terms of probably a guy on a computer with a really good internet connection could do some pretty serious damage. So you probably need just very fast internet. That's probably a good thing to have, I guess.
Thank you.
Sure.
And if it's virtual, you could make it seem like a really giant layer, even if it's a micro. Are you asking a question? No. All right, well, Chad, it looks like our brave people who will come to the microphone have asked their questions.
Sure.